Hello and welcome to Lazy Reviews. My name is Arvid, and today I will be talking about the 5 movies in the Evil Dead franchise. I'll not get into too many details, and I will also keep it mostly spoiler free. Maybe beware of minor spoilers, where I might reveal a few things happening just because it's relevant to say anything about the films. If you want a more detailed review of these movies, I already made a video where I talk about the first 3 films in the franchise with Bruce Campbell as Ash Williams. And I also made a video where I talked about the last movie in the franchise, Evil Dead Rise. Let's get started. The Evil Dead from 1981 was the first film in the franchise. It was the first major film made by Sam Raimi starring Bruce Campbell. They had worked together previously and also made a precursor or proof of concept that would become Evil Dead. It has a small budget of $300,000 and it shows, but to be honest, they really spend their money well. It's quite amazing for such a low budget, especially with all the practical effects. The way they work their way around this budgetary constraint is actually quite brilliant. The film follows 5 young people who go to a cabin in the woods. Not just the woods, but in a very isolated part of the woods that require a bridge to get there. And even on the other side of the bridge, there's only that cabin. That's how isolated they are. So if the bridge is destroyed, they're completely isolated from the rest of the world. How they could afford building such a big bridge for just one house, well, don't ask me. And while exploring this house, they find an old book of the Dead, and a recording of a professor talking about this book. And in the recording, when they play it, he utters a phrase, Sumerian phrase, that ends up being an incantation that unleashes evil upon this land. Our heroes then have to face the insurmountable odds of fighting pure evil. So that's what I will say about the plot. The biggest issue is that it has a lot of these annoying horror tropes, such as characters doing really stupid things that will get them in trouble, such as seeing something outside, going outside unarmed to confront what you saw, not just outside the house, but to move into the woods to confront it alone without informing anyone else that you went there, or to split up or have things happen off camera and you don't really understand why they happened. It's just what a lot of movies do, especially horror movies, and I really wish it wasn't in this movie because it honestly does affect the quality negatively. But overall, it is a really good movie. The practical effects are quite nice. They look quite nasty. They use stop motion and claymation to show bodies dissolve. They are having limbs chopped off. They are having mutilated bodies that may not look real, but because it's practical effects, it looks nasty enough to work. The makeup is not the best, but it's serviceable. It just works just not only as an eerie, weird horror movie, but also as a macabre, gory, bloody horror movie. It has both elements, but actually I think the element that works the best is that our main protagonist is not a hero. He feels like an everyday man. Bruce Campbell plays this guy who is a lovable, sweet, joking character. He has this really sweet relationship with his girlfriend, but he's not exactly a coward. He just has a natural fear to things, like going into a dark basement to search for a friend. When push comes to shove, he's unable to actually take the necessary action, such as he grabs an axe. He's not able to use it. He's too frightened to use it or too shocked to use it. And it is the other male character who has to step in and be the man, until at one point Ash or Ashley or Bruce Campbell, the character, is forced to become a man of action, to survive the situation, to overcome these circumstances he finds himself in. So he really grows as a character in this film, and I really like that. I do like that your protagonist in a horror movie, or protagonist in an action movie maybe as well, doesn't start out as a machismo, gunslinging, one-lining, womanizing, charismatic guy, but that he starts out as you. He starts out as a member of the audience, as how a member of the audience might think that they would react to a situation that's similar. That makes you immerse much more. It makes you empathize much more with the character. They feel more real. They feel like more grounded in reality. It makes them more scary to think about that this guy is actually incapable of surviving these odds. So how will he survive? It makes you root much more for him, but also be much more concerned Whereas if it's a character who is just fully capable of chopping down enemies left and right, you're never really that afraid that he might not come out alive or that she might not come out alive, because they are so skilled, they are seemingly so capable that they will, of course, they will overcome their odds. All this being said, Ash Williams will be this character in the second film and the third film. It's only the first film where he is a bit wimpy, a bit of a coward, very cautious. Later he will become the all-alpha, quipping, joking, maniacal Ash Williams that I love, and that pretty much came to define how Bruce Campbell usually plays his characters in the movies he's in. And I think it's perfectly possible to like and love both aspects of a protagonist. And I think I've already said enough about the first one. It's good, but the second one is better. Evil Dead 2 from 1987. So to address the elephant in the room, there's a big discussion if this is a remake or a sequel. I would say it's definitely a remake. If you want to hear my arguments for this, you should watch the video where I review the trilogy, the first 3 movies, as I get into much more detail there, but I will treat this as a remake and not a sequel. In this film, Ash Williams goes to the cabin with his girlfriend, and they find the recording. Ash plays it, and that unleashes evil, just as in the first film. It possesses his girlfriend, and 5-6 minutes into the movie, the girlfriend is dead and he is alone in the cabin. So already it's a very different movie than the first one. Its pacing is much faster, but also it plays much more on the concept of isolation and slowly going insane. And it's much more wacky with all the things going on. It also has a budget that's 10 times bigger than the first film, so they also can pull these things off. So he spends the first roughly 40 minutes alone in this cabin, and then the daughter of the professor, the one who made the recording, she shows up with some new pages they found to this ancient Sumerian text, the Book of the Dead. She arrives with the brother, and because the bridge had been destroyed by the evil entity, they could not drive to the cabin. Again, the cabin is the only thing on the other side of this bridge. And at the bridge, they meet these 2 locals who tell them about an alternate route that they can use to walk to the cabin. But of course, they need their help to find it, and therefore those 4 people go to the cabin. So the second half of the movie focuses around these 5 people in this cabin in the middle of nowhere, isolated, and fighting these demonic powers. So it's not just the pacing that's very different in this film. And it's not just that the budget allows it to do much more than the first one did, and that Sam Raimi became a much more skilled director than he was in the first film. He's more seasoned, as well as Bruce Campbell is a more seasoned actor. It's also that Bruce Campbell's character, Ash Williams, is a completely different person. He is, as I described before, he is this wisecracking, no-nonsense, strong man of action that is very selfish and also not very smart. So there are plenty of situations where he could have acted much more wisely than what he actually does, just because he is the person he is. And yes, he is a man of action. He is fairly brave, but he does have many moments in the movie where he's more or less panicking, reacting to situations with a great sense of fear. Although he's never paralyzed from taking action, he's not a superhero in this movie either. So he's quite a relatable character still. He is very much the reason why the movie works. Of course, there are other reasons. Without him, it could still be a good movie. I don't think it could be a really good movie, because Sam Raimi is really competent. He uses this cinematography, the sound design. So much thought and effort is put into pretty much every frame of this movie. So much effort is put into the practical effects, the makeup, the camera movements. And yes, it is a horror, but it also has so many comedic elements that it's pretty much a comedy horror. And it really works on all levels. It's a very, very good movie with these things. They all come together. And I think Bruce Campbell is the glue that ties it all together. Bruce Campbell is the glue why it works so well. That being said, the other actors actually also quite fine in it. They are a bit more one-dimensional, but then again, Bruce Campbell is fairly one-dimensional, and it's just one hell of a ride to be on. And although I would like to jump to the next film here, I will make one quick remark that didn't make it into review of the 3 first movies. There is a huge plot hole that I didn't think about until last time I watched this. They arrived at the wrong cabin. Or rather, what are they doing at the cabin? Because the cabin was supposed to be inhabited by the professor and his wife. Only, of course, they are not there when Ash and his girlfriend arrive, because they're already gone, dead. But they're supposed to be there because otherwise, why would the daughter and the brother think they would be in the cabin? It's their place of residence. So it's not like Ash could have rented the place. It's not like he could have booked it. There is a short scene in the car on their way to the cabin where they talk about the cabin, and it seems like Ash knows something about the place they're going to, but not a lot. So could it be that they drive to the wrong cabin? That they were meant to go somewhere else? But if that's true, yes, it would say a lot about the characters that they're really bad at finding their way. That actually would be very true to Ash Williams' character. Him being very confident and also quite stupid, so you know someone who definitely wouldn't ask for directions. But as we have established, there's a bridge to get to this cabin. It's the only thing on the other side of that bridge. So you would have to be really bad at finding your way to actually accidentally get to this cabin. And wouldn't you be weirded out a bit by all the things you would find in the cabin? That it does look fairly inhabited, almost like from one day to the other, someone just disappeared. It is a major plot hole. And if any one of you watching this knows anything about this or has any good theory about this, please let me know, because as I said, it has not been until maybe the 8th or ninth time watching this movie that I actually realized that there is a big plot hole here. And I think it just tells you something about how good the movie is, that it's such a glaring error, at least I think it's a glaring error, and the movie is entertaining enough for me not to think about it. And yes, this movie has a lot of flaws. I love it, but it has quite a few flaws, and you can check out my other review where I go into those details. Because right now I should continue to the third installment, Army of Darkness, or Medieval Dead, from 1992. This is a direct sequel to Evil Dead 2, because in Evil Dead 2, in order to banish the evil, they have to send it back in time, and Ash is accidentally sent back in time with it, to 1300 AD. This film, Army of Darkness, starts out the same place, although they did reshoot pretty much every single scene. The movie starts off with Ash talking about the past events leading up to him landing in the past. You even see him, you realize he works in this place called the S-Mart. He was a sales assistant. And yeah, they land in medieval England. We know it's medieval England by the alternate ending of this film, and also because everybody is speaking English and there is a Scotsman. It's not really said he's a Scotsman, but it's very obviously a Scottish person. It's filmed in California, so it looks a bit weird, to be honest. And this is not really a horror movie anymore. It's an action, comedy, fantasy film. You should not try to look at this movie for historical accuracy. I mean, if you go into Army of Darkness expecting that from it, you would have your priorities wrong anyway. And it should just be treated as a fantasy movie, even though it does set it in a somewhat real context. Very brief plot summary. In 1300 AD, the evil has been unleashed on the land. And there is a prophecy that a hero will arrive to free the people from this evil. And the people that find Ash as he drops from the future, they come to believe him to be the chosen one or the promised one. And all he wants is to go back to the future. But in order to do so, the local wizards tell him that he needs to find the Necronomicon. It will have the spells to send him back. In finding the Necronomicon, he makes a mistake and instead makes everything much worse. And the last 30-40 minutes of the film, give or take, has Ash prepare the people in the Middle Ages to fight an army of the undead and then actually fights them. This plot works very well. The movie never gets dull. It is paced very well. It also kind of feels like it has two chapters. The one is him on the journey to find the book. The second half is him preparing to fight the results of his own misdeeds. You kind of get two movies for the price of one, and the pacing therefore works quite well with this, that it's slow when it is supposed to be slow. It is a personal story with him being haunted by the evil in the woods, or with him fighting all these things alone, and then also coming together and having this siege. It has a lot of comedic value. It has a lot of ingenuity, and it's overall a very enjoyable movie. It has flaws. Again, you can watch my other videos to understand what those flaws are, but it is overall a masterpiece. If you do want to watch it, you should probably get the theatrical cut. The director's cut has some scenes that really don't work that well, in my opinion. It is very much a movie from the 90s. It actually feels a bit like The Mask, even though it came out before The Mask. Some of this 90s comedy really doesn't work that well. And the director's cut has even more of it, even though the director's cut might have the better ending. The theatrical cut is the better movie, in my opinion. 21 years later, we got Evil Dead, the remake, 2013. This is the only movie I didn't do a separate review for, so I might add a bit more details here than I did for the other movies. It's not a shot-by-shot remake, as it follows this group of young adults, not exactly sure how old they're supposed to be, who rent this cabin in the middle of the woods so that they can isolate one of the girls because she is a drug addict who is going cold turkey, and they need to be able to restrain her and to make sure that she goes through with it, that she will not just start using again. So it actually is a really good reason why they are in this cabin in the middle of nowhere, and why they don't just leave when things start getting weird. But in this cabin, they do find a book in the basement that is wrapped in barbed wire. It has very strict instructions not to read it, but of course one of them reads it, and all hell is let loose, and they have to persevere against this evil, this force of evil. This is a difficult movie to talk about because I didn't like it that much. The acting is not that good. It's also not awful. It's just not memorable at all. It has an intro scene that is straight out of The Hills Have Eyes and doesn't really feel natural in this setting. I am sad that they couldn't just start off with a mystery, but they have to show in the beginning, that there is evil at play here. Because the beginning is actually taking place in the cabin, and then our protagonists stumble across the scene of this, but it feels so forced, because why would they leave the book behind? Even though it has instructions not to read it, they of course read it. So why would they use this? People who know about this evil and are able to read the book and to do what must be done, why do they leave it out in the open? One of the guys gets this book. At that time, he doesn't even know it's a book because it's wrapped in this black plastic bag, I think it is, and this has barbed wire, so he cuts off the barbed wire, is warned not to read the book. But I can understand why he would not follow the instructions not to read it. The movie doesn't establish this, but maybe he's even kind of possessed to read it. So, remember, you're not supposed to read the book. The book is translated. So the book is in Sumerian, but someone who understood Sumerian translated it and wrote the translations on the pages. But the only one who really seemed to be able to do so would be the people who don't want you to read it. Because the movie doesn't really tell you that this was in the hand of people who wanted to use it for evil. It only seems that this was in the hands that whoever used these translations were people who tried to stop this evil from happening. Again, it doesn't exactly say that, but why is this book translated when you don't want someone to read it? And even if it had been translated by the wrong people, then they could try to raise the translations so that it wouldn't happen again when some innocents got their hands on it, especially when they leave it out in the open. Or yes, it's in the basement of a cabin, but they leave it, they leave it for someone to find. It's such a big flaw. It feels so forced. It feels like they didn't know how they would get their hands on the book and why they would start reading it. It really feels poorly written because in my opinion, it is really poorly written. And yeah, I think that the effects are quite okay. Yes, it seems that there are almost no practical effects in this one. The way the Deadites look is not that interesting, but they do have some effective scenes with self-mutilation. They do have some fairly effective fight scenes. And this movie has a reputation for being really, really, really bloody because this movie has blood raining from the sky in one scene. That's why everything gets bloody. I think it has 2 effective gory scenes, maybe 3, where it gets bloody. But aside from that, it's not like insanely bloody. I think it earned that reputation in the wrong way. I don't think you can just have one scene where it rains with blood and then suddenly you have the bloodiest movie there is. At least it's a very misleading way of... Yeah, I don't know. It didn't really rub me the right way, this film. As a horror movie, as a modern horror movie, actually it might be better than most horror movies of the time it was made, but I think it is a very, very, very basic, very mediocre horror movie. Finally, Evil Dead Rise 2023. So again, I did make a full review of this where I go into all the details. Very basically, this is Evil Dead, but in LA. It takes place in a rundown apartment complex somewhere in Los Angeles. In one apartment, this complex lives a mom with a teenage son, teenage daughter, and a younger daughter. So she's a single mom. And she has a sister who's our main protagonist, who has been out touring with this band. She's a sound technician or something. And she just discovered she's become pregnant. So she goes straight to the sister to get some support from her. She doesn't really know what to do in this situation because she has a rock and roll lifestyle, not really suited for being a mom. There's an earthquake. and the son discovers a vault hidden underneath the apartment complex where he finds a lot of religious artifacts. He finds these recordings, these phonographs from 1923 made by this preacher, and he finds this hidden tome, a book with teeth, and decides to take it all with him. And the son just so happens to be a DJ, so he has a set where he can play these phonographic recordings, and in so he starts also reading the book, and lo and behold, evil is unleashed. It possesses the mom, and the majority of this film is a home invasion film where the mom is trying to get into this apartment where the 4 other characters have to survive the situation. And that is what I will say about the plot. I have a lot of issues with this movie. I also have some praise for it. I'll just keep it short by not going into too much here. This film is full of references to other movies. It's full of homages. It has some good ideas, some great visuals. Overall, the design of the Deadites, I don't like it. I think, again, the issue is it's mostly CGI. Even if it's makeup, it looks fake. I think that's the problem often with CGI, that when it's practical effects, it might look silly or goofy, but it's still practical, so it still looks more real than something that isn't real. At least where the technology is at right now. It has a lot of things that are not established that well, and a lot of the plot points, a lot of the ways other situations feels really forced, either because of poor writing or because they really wanted to cram down these references that to some might be enjoyable. To me, I got frustrated that, as an example, they have the lead characters say multiple phrases that Ash Williams said in the other movies. I don't know what you feel about that. To me, it's like someone saying in The Predator, get to the chopper, to reference Predator. It feels like fan service, but done in a very lackluster, lazy way. So what I like about this movie is that it's quite grisly, it's quite bloody, it's gruesome, it's macabre. You get some very nasty kills, but mostly it's just a bit boring, and it's very ugly to look at. It has a few scenes that look okay, but as with the remake, the problem is that it's very much a modern horror movie, meaning that there seems to be no interest in creating beautiful pictures. The cinematography is as bare bones as can be. The lighting is just never playful or innovative in any way. It's just dark, dark, dark. I think it had one scene where I think the lighting was a bit cool, but that's it. It's dark, it's too blue. If it has any colors, too blue or oversaturated colors. It's just not pleasing to look at. And yeah, it had some memorable scenes, I'll give it that. But because of all these references, all this that feels forced and poorly written, I did go away with a feeling that I didn't like the movie, especially because the way the movie ends, I really didn't like it. Again, for the reasons I did describe without going into too many details. You can see my other video for the details. But I don't want to be too harsh on it. Had this not been an Evil Dead movie, it would be more enjoyable. You could excuse it more. And it's not even that it breaks that much with the Evil Dead universe. It does break with some laws in it, and it's not a remake, it's supposed to be set in the same universe, as in the same timeline as Ash Williams' story, and that is problematic in some ways. But that's not the main issue. The main issue is that it's just compared to the first 3 movies, this is not good. Compared to other modern horror movies, this is a bit above mediocre. A lot of it is very mediocre, very run-of-the-mill, but some of the things that happen in the movie is more than other movies would do. I'm trying not to spoil it here. And yes, a lot of the kills, a lot of the gore effects are nice. It is a bloody movie. Those scenes are effective enough for it to be above mediocre. I don't know if it's recommendable, but it's above mediocre. But talking about recommendations, let's go to the wrap-up. If you have not seen any of the Evil Dead movies, I would say watch Evil Dead 2 and Evil Dead 3, Army of Darkness. If you do like Evil Dead 2 and can enjoy fairly bad or cheap practical effects, I would encourage you to watch Evil Dead 1. It is not as good as Evil Dead 2, but it is a good movie and it is interesting. But if you start watching Evil Dead 1, I'm afraid you will not like it and therefore won't watch 2 or Army of Darkness, thinking you will get more of the same. Well, you will in some ways, but you will only get improvements to what's already good in that film. For the remake, the thing is, I cannot recommend it. The remake is not a bad film. It's just not good either. It's just very mediocre. If you have so much time in your life that you just watch horror movies all the time, have already watched all the good old horror movies and all the good new horror movies, and want more, then you can watch the remake. I will actually say the exact same thing for Evil Dead Rise, only that I find it more enjoyable than the remake. If you really don't like old horror movies, then I think, like, if you don't like Nightmare on Elm Street movies, if you don't like Hellraiser, if you don't like The Thing, The Fly, those type of movies, then I don't think you would enjoy, especially not the first Evil Dead, but maybe not even the second or Army of Darkness. And then Evil Dead Rise and the remake might be more your cup of tea. It's just so weird. Because I'm not like that, I can't. I'm trying to understand how other people work. By that measurement, you might enjoy those two movies much more than the first three movies that I personally find much better. But different tastes. So, overall, yeah, I'll just say none of these movies are bad. One is mediocre, one is above mediocre, one is good, and two are outstanding, in my opinion. In the end, I'm just one man with an opinion. That's what I'm here for. Well, that's what I can provide here. I hope sometimes you also get some insight or some thoughts that you might not have thought about yourself, especially when talking about plot holes and the like. And I just hope you found this useful or entertaining or something else. You can also read my reviews of these movies or other movies on my profile on Letterboxd called The Robot Quits. There will be a link in the description. I've already talked too much, so goodbye.